In this video, we're testing out the Varia home grinder. Welcome, my name is Patrick Rolfe and this is Coffee with April. For this episode, we're continuing to try different grinders. So we're in the process of making our own hand grinder. We said it many times before, and it's coming. It just takes a little bit of time because grinders is a little bit complicated, which is why we're testing all of these different grinders. And the grinder that we're trying today is not a hand grinder, but interesting nonetheless. In this grinder, I actually used myself and brewed several hundred cups of coffee during the SAJ event earlier this year. So that's why we kind of thought it would be interesting to feature it here as well, because I liked how that performed during those kind of 3 days of brewing with. The grinder here is the Varia grinder, not to confuse with Vario from Barazza. It is a little bit confusing though. The company is registered in Hong Kong. Somehow it originates from New Zealand and they produce in China. So a little bit of a long story, but that's basically how it is. Looking at their different products, to basically have a scale, they have some brewing equipment, and they have the grinder, which I believe they're kind of the most famous for. This grinder comes in two different versions, white and black, and it's fair to say I think the design inspiration is most likely coming out of Fellow, as their products actually looks very, very similar. Now, I guess one of the questions are, do they actually perform similar? And it's not a comparison video. We're going to do that as well. We're basically going to bring up the Fellow Odd and this Varia to see which grinder is performing the best. But for now, we're going to focus on this grinder, and I just want to kind of share some of the details with it. So the design of the machine is very, very simple, which we kind of like. The dial up here, how we feed in the coffee. There's some small little magnetic touches on the grinder that also makes a lot of sense. The grinder, however, does get a little bit messy when you're using it. There's no way to kind of, as we do traditionally, tap out the coffee that is kind of stuck through static. And that's a little bit of a challenge here, right? So it's not as clean as maybe I want it to be over time. That being said, it is battle tested during the SAJ event. We made a lot of coffees and it actually performed really well. Now, when it comes to grinding, it's a little bit interesting. As most grinders do, this you can basically go very, very coarse or very, very fine. So you do that by basically just lapping around the different numbers. So you go up to 9 and then you can actually continue to the next kind of round and go even coarser if you want to. When we use the grinder, we end up on kind of from 0 up to 9, and 9 being around 600 to 580 microns, more or less, which is a little bit different depending on when you grind. So doing a bunch of measurements on this grinder is quite inconsistent when it comes to distribution of particle size. And one of the challenges there is that you're ending up with some really, really large particles, a big chunk of kind of medium sized, and quite a lot of small particles as well. So it's actually quite hard to get a consistent reading on any kind of micron because it's such diverse. It's one of the kind of widest spreads of particle size we've seen, which traditionally we argue is kind of a good thing here at April. So what we're going to do here is just brew a coffee, have some taste, and see how everything comes out. So I'm dosing 12 grams of coffee here. And the average retention of this grinder seems to be kind of okay. If I'm looking for to get 12 grams out, I'm dosing about 12.2 in, which is very kind of classic. Now, one of the things here, you can see that the grinder is already kind of building up a little bit of mess, which is something that I don't really like. And something that is also a little bit hard to clean, right? And again, after grinding a lot with it, you can really see that it builds up a lot of stuff inside of this that you really want out. Usually they have a little brush. I'm sure we have it somewhere. We just kind of misplaced it that you can clean it with, but it's a little bit inconvenient and you end up with a lot of coffee just all over the place. However, nice little magnetic attachment here, we should say as well. It kind of flows really easy. 12 grams of coffee, 92 degrees water, and the coffee that we're using is a washed processed Pacamara varietal from the El Socorro farm in Guatemala. One of our favorite coffees at the moment, so it makes sense to kind of try it. We're going to do a classic two-step pour, which Most of you by now know it's 100-100. So the idea when working with this grinder, any kind of grinder, is seeing how they perform within our kind of usual pouring structures. Obviously, you can add kind of a layer of complexity to this and integrate a new pouring structure based on the grinder you're using, which, to be fair, is kind of what you should do, especially, let's say, in a competition format, right? Where it's really about maximizing the quality. Here we want to see what are the grinders and how do each grinder perform within the system we have already created, right? An interesting conversation in the world of grinders is, for example, if we're looking at a future where different grinders are created to perform better on, for example, a flatbed brewer versus a cone brewer, right? Or, for example, a full immersion brew. That's kind of the next level of grinders, and we kind of want to be able to take that journey somewhere in the future, right? So we're gonna let this go down, we're gonna taste it, evaluate it, do some more measurements, and then be right back with a little bit of a conclusion. We're back with a little bit of a summary. So simple rundown on the recipe. So 12 grams of coffee, 200 grams of water at 92 degrees Celsius, roughly around 70 ppm in terms of total hardness. The TDS that we're always looking for when we do our brews is around 1.25, which is actually exactly what we got here, on the grind size of 9 on the grinder, right? So all in all, this is actually tasting pretty good. It's clean, it's transparent. We can clearly taste the coffee, the varietal, which is the most important part, right? So basically, the grinder is a pretty good grinder, right? Then you can always discuss, is it value for money? Where's the price point? Here, I believe it's around 300 euros, if my research is correct. Otherwise, I'm sure one of you will tell me, and we're gonna update that somewhere. Which basically puts this really similar in terms of price to the fellow odd, right? Depending on where you buy it. So the question here is really, which grinder is the best? I think those are really the ones that are trying to kind of battle it out. We're gonna bring you a comparison video just to kind of give you our perspective on it. The burr set here, just for you that are a little bit more geeky, is a 38 millimeter burr set. We have kind of experienced that it feels a little bit wobbly when it grinds. I'm not sure if it's just this unit. When I had the unit that I worked with in Japan, it wasn't really any issues. It felt very kind of compact. So I'm not sure if it's a specific challenge here, but it's something to consider. I'm sure the manufacturer probably has some input here that we'll share as well. And we'll try to integrate them in some way as well. But all in all, it's a nice, good-looking small grinder, small footprint. You can brew tasty coffee with it. It's a little bit dirty, it's a little bit messy, but tell me a home grinder that isn't, right? That's kind of the reality for all grinders all over the world, right? But in general, it's pretty good, and it gives us the coffee profile, or the kind of cup profile that we are looking for, right? So with that said, we're going to continue to search for what we believe is the best kind of grinder, and then eventually, hopefully in 2023, give you what we think is the best grinder. Before that, we love to hear your thoughts on different home grinders. What are you using? I'm personally very interested in this kind of hand grinder versus electric grinder. Why would you choose either of them? What's the argument behind that, right? And we're already taking this conversation to Patreon. I've done a few videos already where we're discussing these kind of different types of grinders. So I was super curious to hear your thoughts. And if you want to be part of that discussion, please sign up. And until further notice, thank you for watching and have a good day. We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see, because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.